Hello and welcome back to episode 9 of High Lit with Carlisle Fletcher. I'm your host, Carlisle Fletcher, and this week. We were gonna be here yesterday. So apparently, some people who drive semis think that they drive small cars, and they try to fit it through the back alley in my neighborhood, which resulted in all the electric wires and the internet wires going down. So we didn't have electricity for like half a day and Wi-Fi for like a day and a half. And that was great. So I just couldn't. But that's why we weren't here yesterday. So we're gonna be we're doubling up today. That's it. Welcome back. It's great to be back. I missed you. Anyways, what I want to get into for the first part of today. Oh no. I'm booming all over here. Don't want to be on that side of the screen today. You know, sometimes you gotta welcome variety into your life. But, so I think do we have a little white bar under me right now? I swear to God. Oh, I swear to God. I think we're good now, right? Right? No, not even close. Maybe let's go a little bit. We're good now. I think so. I think we're just gonna have to call it there. Anyway, so what I wanted to talk about, getting started, let's get into, is that so Japan is to allow cannabis-containing medicines. That's right. I did leave the window open. We'll fix that one too. So Japan has very strict drug laws, and cannabis in all forms are absolutely forbidden, which is, however, a problem, especially for doctors. For this reason, the regulation of drugs is to be relaxed. A few months ago, the Japanese government set up a committee to discuss an adjustment of cannabis prohibition. In addition to tightening the laws, there was a discussion about whether cannabis should not be allowed as a substance in medicine. According to initial reports, the Ministry of Health has decided in favor and wants to allow cannabis as a medical substance for the first time. If permissions for the approval of such drug is indeed approved, Japan will have to change its drug laws, as so far neither the production nor the import of drugs containing cannabis is legal. How far Japan will relax the drug laws is not certain. So, sorry for that, just being burpy and all that, but so that's super rad. Yeah, I'm very excited to hear about that because I think that again, obviously, I think that cannabis is very underrated, very underrated substance. And I think it's got a lot of potential, and I think that Japan, I mean, you know, they're some of the best like producers in the world. Like they're very good at refining their craft and getting good at shit. So I'd be very excited to see them join the industry and like what they would do with it, because I think that they have a lot of potential to see the medical reality behind this. And I also think that they're kind of getting the point where it's like, I think cannabis is sort of I think Japan's picking up that it's like, yeah, cannabis isn't really about the recreational substance and music festivals. It's more about like, how do we get a cheap medicine that's not addictive to do a weird sort of jack of all trades role? You know. So this is very surprising because, I mean, I think everybody understands. I think everybody watching my show would understand how Japan is. It's a very restrictive, insular, and traditional culture. They don't really like outsider influence. They don't really like drugs. They don't really like any sort of what they would see as something that would be bad for society for them. So the idea that they're opening up to cannabis is like fucking groundbreaking. I mean, Thailand is really leading the way on that one too. So, we could see cannabis slowly encroach into Asia. That would make that region much more interesting to me, which not to say it's not fascinating already, but just as a tourist, essentially. I don't really go places I can't smoke weed. Anyways, similarly surprising, Alabama governor signs medical cannabis access measure into law. So here he's talking about 70 daily doses of medical cannabis, which is 50 milligrams of the first 90 days. So no flower, no edible product. cannabis formulations, tablet, capsules, tinctures, or gel cubes. Fucking suppositories, guys. Inhaler. Okay, so the inhaler, definitely should be looking up this one, because this one is definitely, let's just see if we can get any quick updates on this, because like some of this stuff is like very, very tight. So I just pulled up 2 products here where it's like, I'm wondering if they would be allowing stuff like this and stuff like I don't really know what a nebulizer is, but because I mean, obviously I smoke weed, but still, what I'm imagining is this stuff, from what I've been able to understand, actually is really good. And it's like, it hits really quickly, and it's very controlled. It's very, so it's like I have no issue with that one. I think that one's good. That's cool. Yeah, that's Japan and Alabama coming around on legalization. And I think that now that we are seeing states that are so, or not states, but seeing a state and seeing a country that are so, for the last 50 years, that have been so set in the stones again. It wasn't even like they were listening. It was a no. It was at the gate no. So now that we're seeing a progress of these people who were like maybe the hardest people to win over, accepting the substance in a medical capacity, I think we're seeing a world changing. Obviously, everybody has seen it over the last 10 years. We've seen the world change, but this is I think this is the final steps of security. After this sort of adoption is when the real mainstream, like your Coke and Pepsis, are going to be popping out, and like your pharmacological companies related to cannabis. I mean, this is just my predictions, is that this is what's really going to be required for this to become a mainstream societal push. And I also feel like once Alabama has a robust and effective medical cannabis program, then conservatives really aren't going to be able to look away from it. So both of those 2 things, not really medical research, but fascinating developments that I think are going to change everything. And I think that also, if we're going to ask, so why are these really, I would say ultimately, kind of conservative people looking at this substance? And it's looking at people, so this is a 5-year review, or as a review of patients from 5 years in Alberta, Canada. And it's finding that people are using less opiates. It's like you're seeing that people are using less opiates over time on high dosages. So it's helping people wean off in when you're using them in cannabis and opiates in combination. And you have the same thing going on with benzos, where 45.2% of patients successfully discontinued their pre-existing benzo therapy, which doesn't even mean using it together. It means that they got off benzos like Xanax. This is a very respectable journal, but I'm not immediately seeing. Okay, so we got, there you go. And over here we've got showing that CBD induces acute antipsychotic-like effects that last for 24 hours on mice models. So this is something that Raphael Mechoulam, we've discussed his discussion of this in earlier videos, where he's saying the distinct potential and novel profile of CBD for treating psychosis and psychotic disorders. So I think that this is you start with animal trials, you go to human safety, you go to human efficacy, you go to large scale, you start, then you have medicine. It's this is I think it is. So it's similar to clozapine or clozapam. So it's I think that there's just a lot of this dense there's a lot of dense social lens, and there's a lot of dense available information that I think is really changing the landscape right now. This is research on the gut microbial diversity, ahedonia, and amotivation. So these are hallmark signs. Again, so we're talking about psychosis, and another thing that we were talking about is that Raphael Mechoulam thinks that CBD, or he was talking about in the 80s, that CBD had a huge potential for treating schizophrenia. Ahedonia and amotivation are hallmark schizophrenic symptoms. Hedonia is hedonia is like hedonism, it's pleasure. Anhedonia is the inability to feel pleasure, where it's like there's just not a motivation, where it's like, schizophrenics eating their favorite meal and they don't really feel anything about it. They're they're like on a beach town and they don't really care. It's not an all the time thing. It's not like they care about nothing, but it's just that like a lot of normal things or things that you'd expect them to be socially acclimated to enjoy are not at the forefront of the present of their lives. And that ties into amotivation, because it's like if they don't enjoy or are bought into the world, if they don't feel like it's something that's fun for them or that they really fit into or that they're a part of, why would they be motivated to succeed, be a part of, and contribute to it? So that, like, I would say directly ties into a motivation. So that's why you see so many schizophrenics that don't get out of bed, that are isolated and unable to fully acclimate and assimilate into society, is due to these not only positive symptoms with like the obvious like hallucinations and things like that, but the negative symptoms, which just they show a moodal difficulty kind of normally associating with the public at large. And the results that they had from this study on these symptoms are that gut microbial diversity might contribute to these symptoms due to the ECS and that being unbalanced. And that's why, that's a further reason why treating the ECS with cannabinoids, which is a substance that affects that particular system, may be a potentially successful novel treatment option for a few patients in the near future. By near future, I'm talking about a decade or two. And this is just talking about how cannabis does not interrupt the effects of surgery. When you're using medical cannabis, you're not going to be seeing issues with how people are, going through treatment. And then this is finally talking about, so this is research done on schizophrenics, and it's about cannabis abuse. And, when you're seeing like a control, so somebody who doesn't have any disorder or any, like a medical condition that would otherwise influence the information, when you're looking at people like that who smoke weed, they have poorer scores on cognitive test. But when you're looking at a schizophrenic who has regularly used cannabis, that demographic of schizophrenic is actually more likely than schizophrenics who do not use cannabis to score higher. So yeah, first episode schizophrenics using cannabis showed less impaired cognitive functioning, with most prominent differences in visual memory compared to first episode schizophrenic non-users. However, they differed neither in the clinical assessment of general psychopathology, positive and negative symptoms, nor in medication from the patient's non-user. A comparison of the healthy controls who used cannabis and those who did not revealed no sizable differences in cognitive performances between the groups. So the results, they delivered supporting evidence for the trend of superior neurocognitive. The results delivered supporting evidence for the trend of superior neurocognitive performance in first episode schizophrenic patients with a lifetime of history use compared to non-using patients. So that's all we're gonna have for this episode in terms of just going through information, because I think that it's just important kind of to take a litmus test and to discuss where we are. I think that we have like 4 hours from like today, starting today, we have 4 hours, or really like an hour and 20 minutes, discussing hard information on cannabis science. And displaying this stuff, I think, shows that there's a lot more foundational work that is done. And there's a lot more mainstream acceptance that's happening that's huge, but not socially relevant. Like the government of Alabama doesn't really mean much to somebody who's living in a 7-story in Chicago. They're not really going to give a shit. And, like people will be like, oh yeah, Japan's accepting weed. That's kind of cool. That's kind of neato. But like, I don't feel like people are really going to see how big the wheels that are turning are turning. You also have like Thailand set up a research institute that was helped by the Czech Republic. They sent over researchers, and like the Czech Republic has like a wonderful scene for it. So it's like there's just a lot of things are coming online. Africa is also seeing a lot of development in the cannabis world as well. So there's like, I would say like there's about to be a really big explosion. I would really recommend researching and looking into the medical community, because I do think that the slower you're going to go with something like this, the better, because you want to take every step right. There's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out in like the future that's going to be interesting. Like the THCA crystals that you can snort are interesting, but I mean it's mostly just crystals, you know. So, but you know, it's just when you're getting into how people are growing cannabis, how people are using cannabis, what they're purporting it can do, all that stuff. I think that the society is necessarily going to lag behind the availability of information, and there's just going to be a lot of things that are going to not be accurate. So I would say like just read as much research as you can about the things that you're interested in treating yourself with cannabis for. Talk about it with a physician, and take a journal. You know, like keep a journal on how it affects you and see if it's right for you. Past that, don't believe in the hype, because I like anytime something like cannabis has already been oversaturated with a lot of people who want to make money off of it. We already have a lot of influencers and things like that, so I think that's only going to build in the future. But the exciting news is that I think that in the hard science world, it's only going to be up. It's only going to be better. It's only going to be taken more seriously. So I'd say, you know, because it's like this is just stuff that is always coming out, you know, and I don't know. I think that especially with like Alabama. I mean, I feel like Texas also, they did the hemp legalization, and like if they, I mean, University of Texas also has done like some great research on cannabis already. So again, I think we are here. I think that it's mostly that people don't know we're here, which is why we're talking, or which is why I'm discussing it right now. But yeah, so you know, it's just looking at all of these things. Looking at all these things, there's just, when you're looking at the potential research, like there's also stuff that comes out that's negative. It's just not something that I think really is I don't think that the negative side outpaces the benefit. Where it's like reducing high blood pressure in older adults is like high blood pressure is hell. So it's like, you know, like you have like you got a so. You know, there's after a 3-month follow-up, you had blood pressure reduced by 5 and 4.5 of the unit of measurement. So I mean, like that's, you know, and they also got reduced alcohol consumption. And like, I mean, that's like what we're talking about, is that it's like, I feel like people make a mistake by thinking that you're going to add cannabis to everything, where it's like the idea is that you're going to be having a cocktail, snorting cocaine, taking Xanax, smoking weed, and like, you know, banging. And it's like, bruh, you know, like people like, dude, you can just be a stoner, you know, like you don't need to. It's like what we're seeing with people who use cannabis is not that they're these crazy wild party animals who can't stop using drugs. We're actually seeing people who responsibly use cannabis in an environment where information is readily available, and that they feel like they can, you know, like actually, you know, medicate this way. They use less substances. They get off of pills. They drink less. All of these things. I don't know about cigarettes. That'd be an interesting one. But I'm pretty sure there are studies that have been done. We'll review that. I can just look that up. But when you're looking at all of these studies, I think it's much harder to just argue about weed as a LOL bad meme drug from the 70s, where it's like all you're gonna do is just like fucking make all your clothes tie-dye and sell macaroni art on your college campus lawn, you know. So that's about all that I wanted to get into the context of what's going on, because again, I find this very exciting. essentially all the allies that we can get and all the serious allies that we can get are victories. So I think that we're gonna have a great year. I think we're gonna have a great decade. Obviously, the last decade was pretty fucking cool. This one's obviously gonna also be pretty fucking cool. But that's about it. We're gonna get into the books. Today, I brought into class the Journal of Eugene Delacroix. So there's two of those. Yeah, I do find something beautiful. I started reading clinical trials and clinical studies when I was like 12 to 14. Just to give some context about myself as well. So I've always just found something very elegant and beautiful about the presentation of scientific literature. As somebody who has questions and questions and questions and questions, it's like one of the only places you can just go why, and people won't fucking bully you. You know, it's a place where the restless mind is encouraged instead of punished, and so attaching that legitimacy in that environment to something which I've experienced helping me, where it's like I haven't really experienced traditional pharmacology helping me. I don't really know if I agree with the theory, but I didn't like weed as a kid. Like, I didn't want to like weed. My first experience with it was my first experience alleviating my symptoms of depression in years. So that's where I became an advocate, is like, you know, in like my yeah, it is. Yeah, you know, it's like for me, it is really anecdotal, but still, it's like that's why it feels right to go through this stuff and like just see, you know, it's like why might the anecdotal be true? What is actually happening? What are we actually going through? Cool. So this is the edition of the Journal of Eugene Delacroix that I have. So that's just so we're gonna start with September 30th, 1855. Okay, so went back to the museum in spite of it being Sunday, and immediately attacked the 13th and 14th century figure of angels. The foolish virgins and the bas reliefs are still somewhat primitive in their proportions, but still full of grace or strength. I was greatly impressed by the emotional power. Knowledge is almost always fatal to it. Great manual skill, or even a greater knowledge of anatomy and proportions, immediately allow an artist to take liberties. He no longer reflects the image with the same simplicity. Methods which give him facility in rendering the possibility of taking shortcuts lead him astray and draw him into mannerisms. Schools teach scarcely anything else, for what master can impart his own personal sentiment? All that can be gained from him are his recipes. The student's natural inclination to adopt as quickly as is possible his master's facility of execution, which is the fruit of long experience, corrupts his art, and so to speak, merely grasps one tree upon another of a different species. So like I love Delacroix, obviously. He's a huge influence on my book that has a painter as a main character. As somebody who's a painter, who's he's got an excellent literary style. It's just like, as somebody who loves painting and is trained in literature, fucking perfect. I love this guy. He's like he's a gift. But what I think is really important is to talk about the fact that it's like, when you're getting educated, you're not getting educated in skill, you're getting educated in language or mannerism. This is where I don't really support college for the humanities, is that you can give yourself skill, you can give yourself experience, you can simply read books, you know, you can do the work. And the work is the most important part. There's the connections, there's the socialization, there's all those things, but you can go outside. And if you're talented and you go outside, I don't think it should be that hard. You know? So, but I think that there is just something really true about the fact that it's like you have to do the work for yourself. As an artist, you got to figure it out. No one's going to be able to give you the answer. Nobody's going to be able to give you the key. You just have to do that study on your own and for yourself. So some artistic temperaments are strong enough to absorb and take advantage of everything. In spite of being brought up in ways that would not have come naturally to them, they find their own path through the maze of other men's precepts and examples. They benefit by what is good, and although they sometimes bear the mark of a particular school, they develop into artists like Rubens, Titian, or Raphael. It is absolutely essential that at some moment in their careers, artists should learn not to despise everything that does not come from their own inspiration, but to strip themselves of the almost always blind fanaticism which prompt us all to imitate the great masters and to swear by them alone. One should say to oneself, this method is good for Rubens, this for Raphael, and this for what one discovers for oneself. A handful of naive inspiration is preferable to everything else. They say that Moliere closed his Plautus and Terence one day and remarked to his friend, I've had enough of such models. From now onwards, I look within and around myself. So there is, education is awesome. Education is really important because, again, like the way that I talk about it, I see it as ancestor worship. I see it as this dialogue with everybody who's ever lived before us and has handed down civilization to us as it is now. But at the same time, you got to be you. You can't live with both feet in the past. You can only have one. So it's like when you're dealing with an education, you have to respectfully take from what came before you, but you also have to simply do it yourself. You have to simply be willing, capable, and able to just take care of yourself, figure it out yourself, educate yourself. And you shouldn't need the education of your forefathers to be able to do it. The education of your forefathers should be basically somebody who's the best at doing it, that tells you hey, this is the problems you're going to run into. It should just be kind of a roadmap, less of a crutch. So that's why I like that passage. Confirming my idea that the beautiful is everywhere, and that each artist not only sees it in his own way, but is absolutely bound to render it in his own style. Yeah, this reminds me of my conversation with a friend of mine who is an impressionist painter that paints barbed wire fences in the sky through them. So it's because it's it's the mundane. The mundane's beautiful. It's also realism and things like that. And it's funny because I feel like people always think that realism's so ordinary, or they're it's I want romanticism. I want these symbols. I want epic plots and stuff like that, bro. And it's well, okay, but when you're discussing realism from the point of epilepsy and schizophrenia, I think it definitely has a different color to it, because it's no, it's not unworldly or unrealistic or something like that. It still is of the world, but it is able, I think, to reach the same heights of emotive context. This is where it's as a realist, all of my books are about terrible things. All of them feature horrible things that people have done, and these really difficult to look at situations. And I mean, to me, I see that as this sort of exercise in when you're looking at the world, there's the things that are obviously nice. It's the hero's journey is very well gone through. It's very well set in stone. So it's if you tell another hero's journey with the right pacing and the right beats and similar enough references and tone color to the people who've come before you, then it will fit into the lanes which have already existed. Meanwhile, it's if you're trying to look at the things which we haven't really been able to make into poetry, the Amazon sweatshops, and funnily enough, just looking at that, which I guess probably is hey, sorry, but also hey, and just things like that, where it's also the idea of yeah, we wear this is slave labor, we're wearing slave labor still, and just the hypocrisy in that, I feel hasn't really been. Or maybe I'm ignorant because I just don't read modern lit, but I don't feel it has been translated into, fully into a thematic tool yet. And that's where it's the difficulty of learning things yourself is trying to interpret that new things. What is different in the world? The new is the oldest thing of all, but still every generation does have new problems. And it's trying to take what is new and making that into classic themes. So it's like that is the work of the living author. But also still learning from your forefathers does give you, I would say, taste, humility, and modesty. So, are you ruling your imagination? That is the important thing. We are happy when we believe ourselves to be so. And if our minds are set on the opposite extreme, all the diversion in the worlds will not give us any pleasure. He does this thing where it's like distraction is to like rip oneself apart, and so it's like pleasant to get oneself like, whatever, but like that's why distraction is almost like, it's funny because he's a Frenchman, and I feel like he's using these ideas, but he wouldn't say it this way, because it's like, I feel like it's kind of, it's like, well, obviously he believes in sin, but it's like that sort of idea of just that it's like a bad move, and like I feel like it's more Protestant, where it's like in Catholic, I feel like it's like the right thing to do is distract oneself, but like with Protestantism, it's like, well, it's not the essential work. You must always do the essential work. So the most confirmed realist, when he attempts to render nature in a painting, is compelled to use certain conventions of composition or of execution. If it is a question of composition, he cannot take an isolated fragment, or even a series of fragments, and make a picture out of them. He is bound to set some limits to the idea if the beholder's mind is not to hover uncertainly over an area, which has been unavoidably cut from a large whole. If it were not so, there would be no art. So a painter has to set a focal point. They have to make a construction. They're not just painting. It's like they're painting a scene that like draws the eye and uses the eye. In a photograph of a view, you see no more than a portion cut from a panorama. The edges are as interesting as the center of the picture, and you have to guess at the scene of which you are shown merely a fragment, apparently chosen at random. In such a fragment, the details have much more importance as the principal object, and more often than not, obstruct the view because they occur in the foreground. You need to make more concessions to the fault of reproduction photographs than in the works of the imagination. The most striking photographs are those in which certain gaps are left, owing to the failure of the process itself to give a complete rendering. Such gaps bring relief to the eye, which are thereby concentrated on only a limited number of objects. Photography would be unbearable if our eyes were as accurate as a magnifying glass. We should see every leaf on a tree, every tile on a roof, and on every tile, the moss, the insects, etc. And what shall we say of the disturbing effects produced by actual perspective, especially where human figures are concerned? In a landscape, where parts of the foreground may be magnified out of all proportion without offending the eye of the beholder, the effect is less noticeable. The confirmed realist corrects this inflexible perspective, which, because of its very accuracy, falsifies our view of objects. So, hyperrealism photography. If it's just a info without, or just a picture without any sort of, order or composition or control. It's just like that sort of direction to it. If there's a photography without direction, then everything is just simply information. It's giving you everything. It's like the pores on a fly. It's the dust in the air. It's the like all of this information that your eyes can't really. It's not poetic. It's real. It's reading it. It's it's like looking. It's like a second eye. Painting's not like the eye. It's like the soul. Where it's like it's the soul's view of things. It's not the eye's view of things. Where photography is necessarily the eye's view of things. But then there's the art of photography. This is 1859, so keep in mind that this is not the same time where there was the photography as a developed field. So even when we look at nature, our imagination constructs the picture. We do not see blades in a landscape, nor minute blemishes in the skin of a charming face. Our eyes are unfortunately incapable of perceiving such infinitesimal details and only inform the mind of what it needs to see. Again, the mind itself has a special task to perform without our knowledge. It does not take into account all that the eye offers, but connects the impression it receives with others that have gone before, and depends for its enjoyment on conditioned presence at the time. This is so true that the same view will not produce the same expression when seen from a different angle. This is also just, another anecdotal thing, but so there's like a skyscraper in town that's like, it's like not in the skyscraper nest, so it's like a little bit further out. And I always use it as a landmark, and I've lived in several different places, and I've over the years have viewed it from different positions. And it's funny because the different faces of that building are different memories to me, where it's like seeing it seeing the north face of the building reminds me of living in that neighborhood and like what I was doing then and those like that time period. Seeing the west face of the building reminds me of a time period. Seeing the south face, it's like it's all these like. It's funny because like depending on what side you see the building, it's like this different world that kind of wakes up. What makes modern literature inferior is the attempt to reproduce everything. Cohesion disappears under flood of detail, and the result is boredom. In certain romances, for example those of Cooper, you have to read through an entire volume of conversation and description in order to find one interesting passage. The same greatly spoils the novels of Walter Scott and makes them exceedingly difficult to read. The mind wanders dully over pages of emptiness and monotony, where the author seems perfectly happy to be talking to himself. Lucky painting that requires only a glance to attract and arrest the attention. Yeah. I feel like he nailed it. But I think it's a really interesting discussion, especially as a man who paints and writes. I like his view of like being like, it's like just discussing how it's like. I mean, he really helps. His conversation on halftones really helps me understand painting. Where just like he does a lot of talking about halftones and just like the relationship between color and fitting things. How to just make things more. But I also like the idea of like the different like atmosphere you'd be hanging a painting in and how that would affect the coloring of the painting, because if it was in a different sort of room, it wouldn't be it's like it would gray out much easier, or it just would be flat. And also the word scumbling. So he gave me all those. It's fucking it's great resources. But yeah, I do think it's really interesting when he talks about the immediacy of painting. It reminds me of music, where it's like music is less immediate because it doesn't happen all at once, but still it is immediately engaging. There's like a movement to it. Whereas like I feel like literature is truly a art of reflection. There's the pleasure of it, but like there's also just like I feel like the aftertaste is the thing that sticks with you the longest. The next thing that we got is In Quiet Flows the Dawn. How are we doing on time? Oh, okay. Well, I do have a fair amount to read through this, so we're going to just get into that now. So In Quiet Flows the Dawn, this is Mikhail Sholokhov. So this is socialist propaganda from like 20th century. So the bourgeois is deluding the masses by cloaking the imperialist spoliation with the old ideology of a national war. The working class exposes this deception, raising the cry of transformation in the imperialist into civil war. Of course, such a transformation is not easy and cannot be accomplished at the wish of individual parties. But that is the transformation which lies in the objective conditions of capitalism and of the period of the end of capitalism in particular. And in this direction alone, must the socialists carry on their activities. No votes for war credits, no support of the chauvinism of their own country, no restriction to legal forms of struggle when a crisis has arisen, and the bourgeois has itself repealed the legality it itself created. That is the line of activity which leads to civil war, and which will lead to it sooner or later in the European conflagration. The war is no accident, it is not a sin, as the Christian parsons think, preaching patriotism, humanity, and peace no worse than the opportunist, but an inevitable stage of capitalism. Just as natural form of capitalism, life is peace. The war of our times is the war of peoples. But from that truth, it follows not that we must swim with the popular current of chauvinism, but in wartime and in the war and in warlike fashion, the class contradictions rendering the people continue to exist and will manifest themselves, rending the people. Refusal of military service, striking against the war, and such like are simple stupidity, a poor and cowardly dream of unarmed struggle against the armed bourgeois, a sighing after the destruction of capitalism without a desperate civil war or series of war. The duty of the socialist is the propaganda of the class struggle, even in the war. Activity directed to the transformation of the people's war into the civil war is the only work for the socialist in the period of the imperialist armed clash of the bourgeois of all nations. Down with the sanctimonious, sentimental, and stupid sighs for peace at any price. Raise the banner of civil war. Imperialism has put the destiny of European culture to the hazard after the present war, if it is not followed by a series of successful revolutions, will quickly come further wars. The legend of the last war is an empty, dangerous legend, a petty suburban myth. Hey, you bourgeois people think you can get heaven on earth with the Great War to end all wars? Fucking idiots. You just need like 80 revolutions back to back, and then to have the communist world order, and then you'll have peace on planet. Then you'll have the kingdom of God. Dum-dums. It's not all hell. We don't live in hell. No. If not today, then tomorrow. If not during the present wars, then after it. If not during this war, then in the next that follows. The proletarian banner of civil war will gather round it not only the hundreds of thousands of class-conscious workers, but the millions of semi-proletariat now deluded with chauvinism, and the petty bourgeois whom the horrors of war would not only terrify and crush, but educate, teach, awaken, organize, temper, and prepare for the war against the bourgeois, both of their country and of alien countries. The government of the working class. A parliament, you mean? No. Well, then what? A workers' dictatorship. Take the modern army. It is one of the splendid examples of organization, and that organization is good only because it is flexible and because it simultaneously knows how to give millions of men a single will. Today, those millions of men are sitting at home in various parts of the country. Tomorrow, the mobilization order is issued, and they are assembled at the appointed centers. Today, they lie in the trenches and lie for sometimes months on end. Tomorrow, they go into the attack. Today, they perform miracles, hiding from bullets and shrapnel. Tomorrow, they perform miracles in open battle. Today, their leading detachments lay mines under the earth. Tomorrow, they march for miles in the direction of aeroplanes flying above the earth. That is what our organization, when in the name of a single purpose, inspired by a single will, millions of men change the forms of their social life and their activity, change the place and the methods of their activity, change their weapons and arms in accordance with the modified circumstances and demands of the struggle. The same thing applies to the struggle of the working class against the bourgeois. Today, a revolutionary situation is not present. So, just to clarify, pretty sure you guys have heard some of this fucking propaganda before? No? No. I don't know, man. It is just interesting when you're studied in socialist literature and when you're studied in post-Soviet and pre-Soviet era, and just socialism in Russia in general. You're just going to see how many people are trying to sell you the same shit. You know? Just how many people are, you know, so that's just where I think it's important to know where or like what people are up to, and like what people like this is where I think it's very important that people, you know, that people understand the lineage of their ideas, because you have to know who's your propagandist. That's where also I think it's like, you know, it's like, because god damn it, that's a later conversation. If Logo wants to get on and talk about the fucking intelligence agencies, we can, but that's not exactly my brand. Today, a revolutionary situation is not present. They're not the conditions for ferment among the masses, for an intensification of their activity. Today, they hand you a ballot. Take it. You know how to organize yourself in order to strike your enemies with it, and not in order to introduce them into a parliament, into the comfortable jobs, into men who grip their chairs in fears of prison. Tomorrow, they have deprived you of your electoral rights and have given you arms and a quick-firing gun, splendidly equipped in accordance with all the latest developments of technique. Take this weapon of death and destruction. Don't listen to the sentimental vaporings of those afraid of war. There's still too much left in the world that has to be destroyed with fire and sword for the sake of emancipation of the working class. And if indignation and despair increases in the masses, if a revolutionary situation develops, prepare to create new organizations and to put into motion such serviceable weapons of death and destruction against your government and your bourgeois. So, 2 years this accursed war has lasted. 2 years you have rotted in the trenches defending other men's interests. 2 years the blood of the workers and peasants of all nations has been poured out. Hundreds of thousands of killed and wounded. Hundreds of thousands of widows and orphans. These are the results of the slaughter. What are you fighting for? Whose interests are you defending?
The Tsarist government has sent millions of soldiers into the firing line in order to seize new land and oppress the peoples of those lands as it already oppresses enslaved Poland and other nationalities. The world industrialists are dividing the markets by armed force, and you, in the struggle for their interest, are going to death and are killing toiling men like yourselves. Enough shedding of your brother's blood. Awake, toilers. Your enemy is not the Austrian and German soldier, but your own Tsar, your own industrialist and landowner. Turn your rifles against them. Fraternize with the German and Austrian soldiers. Across the wire entanglement which separate you as though you were animals. Stretch out your hands to one another. You are brothers in labor. The bloody calluses of your toil are still on your hands. Down with the autocracy. Down with the imperialist war. Hurrah for the unity of toilers around the world. Of all the world. So, I mean, like, I do think that there is just... You know, like... Just mind what you fucking say, dude. Like... When you're talking about workers' unity and anti-cap, hey guys, yeah, I've heard all these arguments before. I'm very familiar with anti-capitalist arguments. I've been trained in Imperial Russia, and for me, what Imperial Russia means is basically Pushkin to Lenin. I didn't really train myself in the Soviet era. I'm still like yet to do that because I just basically did like earlier Russian history leading up to it. That's where you got like Karamazin and shit like that. You know, I like starting from the beginning then going to the end, but you know, like there is just this like even in pre-Soviet Russia, all these conversations were very common. Women's liberation, the rights of the workers, education, traveling, and like one of the biggest things that Lenin had, and like why the Soviet Revolution was so successful was the industrialization of Russia and the train network, because it allowed them to mobilize so quickly and allowed them to get around the country so quickly. So, I mean, just all these things I think are kind of lost. I don't understand the American education system at all. Read books. Who the fuck writes textbooks? Who's the fucking turbo dork that we trust? I don't even think they're... You know what? I'm taking the turbo dork license and title away from them. They're just fucking regular ass variety store nerds. Fuck. Just read books and just like learn from history itself like that way. Because again, like that's why I'm talking about like the history of art, the history of literature, the history of painting. All these things are gonna be, I think, more accurate and less controlled by people or at least governments with specific interest. So that's just why I would recommend studying things yourself. Obviously, having studied so much in Imperial Russia, the Imperial censor, first off, exists. So that made everybody have to work around that. And there's like secret languages, basically, which infer things that are not, they're not saying what they mean, but they mean what they mean. And they say that because if they said it the other way, they'd get censored. So it was definitely like an outside pressure. I'm not saying that was positive, but at the same time, I think it was it did do a, no. So the point is that it's not positive, but I understand that is controlled information. But when you're talking about people nowadays, like textbook, bro, that's like a government-funded thing by somebody who went to a fucking shitty school. It's like, not to talk shit on them, I love this program, but it's like somebody who went to like the Committee of Social Thought, or for Social Thought in the University of Chicago, and then was just like, oh, I'm gonna write a fucking book about like American history, bro. Just read fucking letters, read fucking books. Like, I just get a longer attention span. I'm sorry. Like, books are literally free. We have libraries, dude. Everybody can get access to any fucking book that they want for free. And like, that's just where it gets frustrating, is that it's like, dude, just do better. Yeah? Thanks. Sorry, I don't mean to just whine, but it is, it's worrying. It's worrying because, there's a war for your brain, man. Not to be fucking, LOL, but it is just something, that you gotta watch out for, and you gotta take care of. You gotta make sure that you're in control of what you're thinking. You can't be listening to other people's, perspectives on that thing. It's not like you can't listen to other people or like learn and grow with them. It's that you can't trust any sort of organization that's giving you what is a moral right or anything like that. It's funny because it's like I ended up actually appreciating the history or the heritage of English property and individual rights after being trained in socialist literature. I thought that America was the worst country in the world, and I thought that the English were literal demons. But then I learned about Soviet Russia, and I was like, oh, shit. We are not so bad. I have only lived in diverse places where I have known people of radically different faiths, and I have only thought that that was normal and accepted them as the same thing as me. Because we eat the same thing, and we pay the same taxes, and we do the same shit. So I'm used to that. I'm just used to that sort of like, you know, I am used to the Anglo-capitalist, like, fucking hodgepodge, nothing culture. It's like my culture. I love it. I appreciate there's a lot of positive things about it. Is it the most... I mean, with the fall of... So it's like, politically, I couldn't be more happy with it. The fall of collectivism in English culture is kind of shit. That's where, like, Protestantism is kind of dope. But... I don't know. I mean, that's where class consciousness kind of works, but it's like, I don't know, like, that's where I like the Russians. The Russians have the class consciousness and the also just like the holy religious thing where it's just like all people are holy. Really hits it for me, but still, again, just keep in mind, thoughts and feelings are demons. People don't have ideas. Ideas have people. Don't let an idea have you. Anyways, let's break into the music. So I'm glad we're friends. By thank you, I'm sorry. This was actually released by Count Your Lucky Stars, which I brought up earlier on the show, or in an earlier episode on the show. Love them. They're based out of Michigan, and they do absolutely excellent work. I believe it was founded by Empire, which is just a very classic emo band. So absolutely vetted. This is so it's a female vocalist, very approachable vocals. So I'd say like kind of poppy, but not like too poppy. But very, very easy to like. If you like her voice, it's definitely, you can listen to the whole album. It's like a cutesy, bittersweet tale of life, just with like, you know, all the fucking awkward things that you have to put together to be like somewhat of like a polite person. They're also Minnesotan, so I feel like that just is a different sort of emo where they're like, it's the other Minnesotan bands off top are like Remo Drive, I think, and also Tiny Moving Parts. Remo Drive might just be part of a label out of there, but I'm pretty sure. And you know, I feel like there is just that. Dude, they're too sweet. Everything in their life is just this like weird. It's almost like Arrested Development in an album. And for that, I think it's perfect. I'm gonna be honest. I probably listened to this album all the way through over 60 times. Over 60 times. I don't know. I don't really. Whenever something has like a good sound, I'll just listen to it. I don't really care if it's not too incredibly similar to the rest of the stuff I listen to. And this one definitely passed the test. You know, it's fucking really fun. It's really sweet, really enjoyable. These people say if you like say anything, I could, yeah, maybe. I'd say if you like bedroom pop and depression, probably get a little bit groovy with it. Next up, we got Breakfast in Silence. This is Salt Lake City, Utah. One of the weirdest just West Coast picks I've seen, but I love her voice. Or the lead singer's voice. It is just something about it is so catchy. Great character. Love it. I really recommend starting here. And it just goes, you know, it's a 10-track list. And it's more monotone, so it's not as like cutesy, bittersweet anxiety, like, you know, trying to figure out life. It's more of like this just sort of almost Bukowski-esque, jaded view of what it is to be alive. And just like, you know, rocking out in your fucking beanie and just like singing a goddamn song. I love it. You also got, you know, another 9-tracker here, and like both of them far. Yeah, this is a 2020 release too, so both of these are active bands. Both of these are currently making music, so I think that's also a important thing, or not an important thing, but a cool thing. Oh no. I ain't got a burp. I don't know. Having a body is strange. I would really not recommend it. If I could return mine, I would. But yeah. So I'd say start with these 2 albums. This is, I think, like 3 songs. There's 2 songs, and then that one I'm pretty sure. This is a split. The split's very good too. But yeah, there's their socials. You know. Yeah, I've just been digging them. I've just been really digging them. I don't really have much else to say about them, but just please give them a time of day. Just check them out. Love them. Finally, we're gonna do Sincere Engineer out of Chicago. They got this coming out, so like this will, I think it's gonna be September. They're gonna be dropping that. But otherwise, they got this album out. Everything else, I think, is a single. And this one is fucking awesome. So this is Deanna Bellows, apparently. She's got another all 3 of these girls have very distinct character to their voice. All of them are different. Deanna just feels like fucking on point in the culture. Like the Thank You I'm Sorry, I'd say, is like a really, again, it's almost like don't get mad, but it's like Lady Bird. That's what I would say. It's like that kind of vibe. Breakfast in Silence is kind of like fucking, it's like if Sunshine or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it's like if that didn't have Jim Carrey. It just didn't have the dude, and it was just the girl. It was just her. That's what I would describe that vibe as. And then Sincere Engineer is like she's like the girl from Cowboy Bebop. That's what I got. That's what I got off top. But yeah, this one is another just. This one I say is most, so like this one is kind of like bittersweet, sad, bedroom pop. This one is like your more traditional, like kind of just grungy, monotone, almost like New Order, almost like that sort of vibe. And then Sincere Engineer is like it's like a more traditional rock band, if you're gonna like punk, pop punk, alt rock, that sort of anything. If you like any of that, you can get into this. So those are my 3 picks. And that's the first show for today. Wow. Yeah, again, I was about to shoot yesterday. I was like so excited. I like woke up ready, had my selections picked. I was happy. I was like, whoo! And then no. Apparently that is not gonna happen. So what a bummer. What a fucking bummer. But I'm glad that it worked out now. I'm glad that we have power now. Appreciate that. But so, thank you for watching the video. This is Carlisle Fletcher. You can obviously find me here at High Lit 3 times a week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday is the schedule. Today we're doing Wednesday because of the power outage, because a semi thought they could drive through my backyard. Or not in my backyard, the back alley. They thought they could just do that. So that was my life. That's what's going on. Happy to be back. If you like this video, please hit like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if you like. And yeah, great to see you. That's about all. Hopefully another video coming to you tonight. Stay blazed.